Welcome into Fox Soul's Black Report, your space for Black news, Black views, and Black opinions. Today is Friday, February 4th. I'm Seth Lemon.
I'm Nielle.
I'm Romeo.
I'm Demi Lobo. And on today's report, police in Minnesota execute a no-knock warrant, fatally shooting a person who had nothing to do with the case, what the state's attorney general is saying about the investigation. Meanwhile, Florida Republicans are working to create a first-of-its-kind election police force. Then, another state has legalized marijuana in some form, bringing the total to 37 states. That's 3/4 of all of the United States. So does that mean the federal government is any closer to doing the same?
Plus, yesterday's price is not today's price. While you may have to shell out a few extra bucks the next time you stop for coffee. And on Fridays, we just need to laugh a little bit. And we're going to take a look at this week's headlines with the comedian, aka the Queen, Lunell.
Lots to talk about today, and you know how we do it, in our voice and in our truth. So if you're ready, let's go.
We are following a breaking story out of Minneapolis today. Authorities have just released body cam video of a deadly police shooting of a black man, Amir Locke. The video shows the 22-year-old apparently asleep on a couch under a blanket when a SWAT team rushes in his apartment, and within 9 seconds, an officer opens fire, killing Locke. Now, police claim they yelled police before storming into the apartment. The footage, however, does not show that. Now, the police department confirmed that Locke was not the person named in any of their search warrants in this homicide investigation. The shooting happened Wednesday just before 7 a.m., and a freeze frame of the video seems to show Locke holding a gun, but his family says he was a licensed gun owner with a concealed carry permit. Now, Minnesota Attorney General Keith Ellison says he will conduct an investigation into this shooting, but we know last year, Minnesota passed several restrictions on the use of no-knock warrants. So to see this, similarly to how Kentucky did after Breonna Taylor, but it's interesting to see how they're still being executed, and for them to have multiple search warrants with this person never named in any of them. How did a grave mistake like this happen?
You know, I'm glad that you added that he was a licensed gun owner, because there are so many little pieces that people get stuck on. And if he had a gun, if he didn't have a gun, he was in his home, clearly not a threat to anyone, and not even a part of who they were looking for. But the most saddest part to me is that the families, they've been crying out now, having to prove how their son did not deserve to die. And we've seen this over and over again. And that to me is the most heart-wrenching part, a family trying to prove why their son didn't deserve to die. We shouldn't even be having to see this or talk about it right now.
Yeah, that is true. If you think about it, going back to 2015, there's over 20,000 no-knock warrants a year, and 8 innocent people die a year. And sometimes I feel like it's always a black male or female. In this particular case, depending on where you live, you might just sleep with a gun in your hand. He was licensed to have that. There was no reason for this to happen again, and somehow they have to fix this all across the country.
Yeah, it's definitely gut-wrenching, and it's reminiscent of Breonna Taylor. But on a brighter note, it's good that the video was released much sooner. When we think about Ahmaud Arbery, when we think about Breonna Taylor, it took months and a lot of pressure for the video footage to be released, like a lot of other cases. But because of the power of protest and the power of the people demanding, this video footage was released almost immediately. And on another brighter note, Keith Ellison has proved that he is a progressive attorney general and that he holds police officers accountable. So this will not be the end of this case.
So many problems with the Minneapolis Police Department, though. George Floyd, and now this. They will certainly need some federal oversight as they make all of these changes in the future.
And rest assured, Soulmates, we will keep you updated on this story. On to our next story here. There are new developments in Georgia in the federal hate crime trial and the death of Ahmaud Arbery. Lawyers for Travis and Greg McMichael say they will no longer plead guilty in the case. Instead, both men will stand trial a second time for the shooting death of Ahmaud Arbery. A judge recently rejected terms of their plea deal after objections from Arbery's parents. The federal charges include one 1 count of interference with rights and 1 count of attempted kidnapping. Jury selection for the hate crime trial is set to begin on Monday. Now, McMichael, his son, and a neighbor were convicted last year of murder in the death of Ahmaud Arbery. What is striking here is, are you guilty or are you not guilty? The fact that they can go back and forth just because you really just wanted to get serve in federal prison, not state prison. So now, because you're not getting what you want to reel it back in, but you already said that you were guilty, so now which one is it? That's what I would like to know. These men are absolutely despicable.
Yeah, I agree with you. You know what, Ahmaud Arbery, he didn't have a choice on that day of what he could choose, right? These men still do. There still will be trials, so it's so unfair, and I wish there was a way they could take this away from them, saying, look, if you're guilty on one, even on the federal level, we're going to go ahead and make sure that you stay guilty as well. So we know what the outcome should be and hope that it will be.
Yeah, I think this is going to hurt him in trial because first you said that it was a hate crime when you thought that you were going to get a lighter sentence or move to federal prison. And now that that did not happen, you want to change your mind. So I think this is really going to hurt him in trial.
Yeah, it's a good thing that the judge paid attention to what the family was asking for, that they did not agree to these plea deals, and it would have given them a cushier sentence. Serving those first 30 years in a federal prison, you know, a Martha Stewart type prison, would be a lot more comfortable than it would be to serve in a state prison where it's not as nice and much riskier for people there. But
I mean, it is a high-profile case. You have people that are upset about what happened to Ahmaud Arbery, so not to, you know, be happy, not to try to understand their thought process, but I mean, I could understand if they were in jail that there are going to be people that are upset, but at the end of the day, jail is jail.
I mean, it's
so
the same thing.
If you are guilty,
when we talk about cops going to jail, you know, it's not safe, but if you do the crime,
you have to do the time.
And do the time, and thank God that the video was released, just like the George Floyd, what we saw, right? We needed that proof. All right, so President Biden says he will help New York City and the nation fight the surge of violent crime that is sweeping the United States. Mr. Biden toured the city with New York Mayor Eric Adams yesterday. The president's crime-fighting strategy is relying heavily on help from state and local officials. The president's visit came days after the funerals of the 2 Afro-Latino NYPD officers who were killed late last month.
Well, there's a witness in the impeachment hearing of former President Trump that is suing his son and 2 of his allies. Retired Army Lieutenant Colonel Alexander Vindman says that Don Jr. and Rudy Giuliani and 2 others conspired to intimidate him so that he would not testify against the former president. Vindman was working as a White House expert on Ukraine when he was subpoenaed to testify at Trump's impeachment hearings. He reported a conversation between Trump and the Ukrainian leader to superiors, which he says he was authorized to overhear. But in that call, Trump reportedly asked the foreign leader to investigate Joe Biden and his son Hunter. Now, when Congress failed to have Trump removed from office, Vindman was fired from his job.
As Democrats are complaining about how Republican redistricting plans hurt voters, New York Dems are doing their own brand of gerrymandering that Republicans are angry with. Democrats there are advancing a gerrymandered congressional map that adds 3 new seats for their party. New York Republicans are angry because they claim Democrats rushed the plan through the state legislature without public hearings. State GOP leaders say they may file a lawsuit challenging the map's legality.
Florida Republicans are working to create a first-of-its-kind election security force. The Office of Election Crimes and Security would initiate investigations into alleged voter fraud. The department would not have sworn officers of the law. Now, this idea has voting rights groups very upset. They say it's just another attempt by the Republicans in Florida to intimidate black voters. The Trump Department of Justice said there was no large-scale voter fraud in Florida or any state in the U.S.
A former Chicago cop who killed an unarmed 17-year-old black teen is out of prison early. Jason Van Dyke was released Thursday after serving a little over 3 years of a 6-year, 9-month sentence on a second-degree murder charge. Activists and black politicians in the city are calling on the Justice Department to try Van Dyke on federal civil rights charges. The former cop killing Laquan McDonald in 2014, he was beaten by inmates in federal prison early in his sentence. Reverend Jesse Jackson joined activists protest at a federal plaza. Take a look.
16 shots. 12 police on scene. Died in the street. Like an animal. It's not right. I want to thank those who gathered today. We'll be seeing you guys soon.
Reverend Jesse Jackson continues to fight for us. Protesters are demanding federal civil rights charges be brought against Van Dyke.
A former Louisville police officer will spend the next 2 years in prison for hitting and kneeling on a protester. Corey Evans hit the protester in the back of the head with a baton during demonstrations over Breonna Taylor's death. The protester and others were kneeling in front of cops when he was hit. The Justice Department charged Evans with violating his victim's First Amendment right to a peaceful protest. Evans was also sentenced to 2 years of supervised release.
Well, there's a black college student that says she was discriminated against when an instructor called police to kick her and her emotional support dog out of class. Video shows George Washington University student Liza Malinsky hashing it out with her professor last month over having her dog in that classroom. The instructor told her that she needed official paperwork to prove the animal was a service dog, but when Malinsky told the professor she did not need documents for the animal and refused to leave, that professor called campus police. Turns out the student was right. GW does not require students to provide written proof for their animals, and neither does the federal government. Malinsky says the professor emailed an apology to her, and university officials have not said if they will discipline the instructor.
The Tennessee State House is considering a bill that would ban the teaching of LGBTQ+ issues in public schools. The bill would eliminate educational materials they say promote, normalize, or support LGBTQ+ issues. Progressives say the bill is an attempt to erase already marginalized communities in the state. They also say if the bill passes, it could increase the number of kids bullied as well as lead to more suicides.
Medical marijuana is making its way to Mississippi. Governor Tate Reeves signed a bill that goes into effect immediately. Mississippi joins 36 other states in the nation that have already allowed medical use of cannabis. People suffering from AIDS, cancer, and sickle cell disease will be allowed to purchase the drug, but it will take a little while before anyone can get access to marijuana. The state does not have any dispensaries available.
Tennessee's state senate is expelling one of its members after she was convicted on federal wire fraud charges. Katrina Robinson's expulsion strips her of her position as a state senator. The Memphis Democrat called the expulsion a procedural lynching. The former senator says the Senate's decision was racist and misogynistic. A federal jury found Robinson guilty of mismanaging $600,000 in funds for a federal grant for a nursing school she ran. If you recall, we had the former senator now, Robinson, on the show. And, you know, it's just sad because she did have plans to do a lot. And she was very progressive in the things that she was doing, working with the Black Legislative Caucus there. But, you know, if you do something, I mean, sometimes there are consequences to it.
I agree. You know what? She's a black lady in a very powerful position, so all eyes were on her, right? So you really, though you ride a fine line when it comes to making a mistake, it's very unfortunate that this did have to happen.
All right. There are repercussions for the January 6th insurrection that are still reverberating loudly across the country as more than 700 people have been arrested in connection with storming the Capitol. The latest arrest, Aaron Mustafsky, the son of a New York judge. He's pled guilty to 3 different counts. Those charges include 1 count of theft of government property, 1 felony count of civil disorder, and 1 count of entering a restricted building. On that day, he was the about 12th person to breach the Capitol door through the Senate wings after the windows were smashed and that door was broken open. Mustafsky's sentencing hearing is set for May. 700 feels like just a drop in the bucket when we saw the massive crowds that were outside of the Capitol, and thinking back to that huge crowd that was allowed to storm in. They've been releasing new video as the investigation continues, and you see how police officers were really fighting for their lives, trying to prevent we've seen this the other angle of this now, and it's still horrifying to see even more than a year later.
You know, it's I like that you say that more than a year later, because the fact that we're getting new video over a year later now lets you know that this was already out in the world. Trump knew exactly what he did. So many people have already known this was not something that was just planned in a day. This took a while to gather all these people together for the January 6th insurrection. And so I wonder why everything is kind of being slow walked in and released a year later, because if you already had this footage, how come it wasn't released sooner?
Yeah.
The scary The scary part about all this is majority of those people that we saw have not been arrested. They're still Trump supporters, and we know that he may run for president. So this is a scary time for our democracy, and we definitely should be paying attention to the hearings for January 6th.
Absolutely, Nia. The timing is a little strange on that. So Black Lives Matter is shutting down all of its online fundraising streams. This was after California regulators threatened to hold the charity's leaders personally liable over its lack of financial transparency. California and Washington State recently ordered BLM to cease all fundraising activities because the group did not report information about its finances in 2020.